And joining us now is GOP political consultant Matt Klink. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Matt.
Sure.
I just want to dive in here because I feel like we've become a nation that can't hold two ideas at the same time. I'm starting to get really sickened by messages I'm getting of words like, well, I didn't agree with him. I think he deserved it. We heard some of the similar rhetoric when you looked at the United Healthcare shooter, people very upset with the healthcare industry justifying the death of another human being. Can you talk about where we're at and where you see, the president now calling for a focus on liberals, radical liberals? Can you just talk about the rhetoric and where we are? And we are a society that seems to become more divisive instead of being able to hold these ideas at the same time?
Well, so I'll address your question in two parts. First, America has always been a divided country, and we look for events that galvanize the country writ large to help unite us. So, I mean, the fact that this is not a new phenomenon, it's just a modern phenomenon that we're dealing with that is amplified by social media, which brings out the worst in people. I think that if you look at the recent spat of violence, the majority of the violence has come from the left toward the right. And I think that's what Donald Trump is commenting on. And here's where both sides, and I say this clearly, both sides engage in what I call whataboutism. Well, what about this and what about that? And the coarseness of the rhetoric is something that both sides use to mobilize their base. And frankly, at times it goes too far. This probably will end up being a case of that being one of them. We just don't know yet because we haven't caught the killer.
I do have to say, I'm originally from Minnesota. I saw a lawmaker and her husband killed this last year who were Democrats. Yeah. We've seen other issues with Nancy Pelosi's husband getting beaten. So I don't know that this is one side or the other. It seems that we...
I agree with you.
Okay. Well, okay.
Oh, well. Yeah, I agree with you that but if you look at the recent spat of violence, it's coming from people that have espoused extreme left positions, and there have been in the past instances where the extreme right, and I think the key word in both of those phrases is extreme. It's where people take seemingly maybe a little provocative statements, and then the extreme pushes it to a limit that is beyond where normal dialogue will go, and they take action. And that's the part that is disappointing.
Well, Matt, you spoke on this earlier, talking about both sides. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Of course, elected officials on both sides of the aisle swiftly condemned this attack. We want to ask you, do you believe this is a wake-up call for both sides of the aisle about political violence?
No, because sadly, I look at what, the Butler assassination on July 13th of last year. It took about 48 hours for the rhetoric to go back to where it was. And I think that the desire of political candidates and political parties to galvanize the base overcomes the reality that they need to temper their remarks. So I would like to think that, look, if we did what Charlie Kirk did and engaged in dialogue, and, Charlie Kirk was known for the strength of his arguments overcame the pablum or the rhetoric of in his case, of the left. He did it by debate. He did it by conversation. I mean, his whole point was prove me wrong. Let my ideas triumph. If we just did that, we would at least engage in a dialogue and have a conversation. But for too long, college campuses have become, one side, one argument only. And, conservative views have been shouted down consistently, and conservative speakers have been kicked off campuses, all because students think that they might have their feelings hurt if they hear something that they don't agree with. That's not what college is about. You should be exposed to arguments that you don't agree with.
I mean, I love a good debate. If anybody knows me, I love an argument. But I just feel like we have become a society that doesn't know how to do that anymore. As you have your viewpoint that the left's feelings are hurt. I think other people feel that the right attacks certain groups of people and doesn't make their argument one that can be widely accepted. So how do we though come? I come from a state originally born and bred where Jesse Ventura was an independent former
Yeah.
wrestling governor. Al Franken was a senator, and Michelle Bachmann, one of the most conservative representatives to serve, was my representative at the time. I love, there's always spirited debate, and you'd be able to have these types of discussions maybe 15, 20 years ago, but we've way moved past that. How do we come back to the table and be able to have these types of discussions where you maybe don't necessarily agree, but you're not going to move to an extreme where you hurt someone?
Well, yes. Look, what I've been saying, unfortunately, far too much the last 48 hours or 24 hours is, just because your opponent doesn't make you my enemy. And I think that where this has to start, and we didn't just get here within the last 2 years, we need to go back to colleges, which are places where we should have a robust, open forum debate that have, over the last 20 years, become places where one particular ideology has held sway and attempted to push that other ideology out. That's where Charlie Kirk was making his difference. And Turning Point USA has chapters at universities across America, primarily for that reason, to challenge what has been orthodoxy on college campuses that didn't encourage debate. So we need to go back into the schools, and we need to get students used to hearing views that they don't agree with. And rather than abrasively jumping up and screaming and fighting, they need to take those arguments into account and either reinforce their arguments and make them better, or say, hey, I learned something today. Maybe the other side has a point. But if you don't listen to the other side, you're never going to get to the point where you can try to understand where the other person is coming from. And that's where I think we've really lost way in this country.
But that's one segment of the voting population. What about the non-college educated white men who disproportionately voted for Donald Trump?
Well, yeah, and I think you reach them through a variety of different ways. Turning Point USA focused primarily on young male college students. However, look, the fact that Donald Trump did win, we can go back to the root causes of why young males of non-college males voted for Donald Trump, and that's because the left abandoned them. So perhaps, look, there's fault to be laid on both sides, but right now, the challenge, there is no silver bullet, pardon the poor use of a term. There is no one solution to making this better. I think the key is that everybody needs to listen more than they speak. And that's, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should communicate in that proportion. If we can understand where the other person is coming from, we're less likely to just strike out and say, you're bad, I'm good. And that's when the extremists, that's what they want. They want to take this, whether it's for name recognition or to promote a political cause. And that's where I think we have really lost our way, is that it has become acceptable to scream someone down, when before we used to be much better at listening to people and at least trying to give them an understanding.
Well, Matt, I think everyone should be able to agree on that point. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks a million.